Begin tonight's forum with the flag salute, so if you'd please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For over 100 years, the goal of the League of Women Voters at the local, state, and national level has been and is to promote active and informed participation in government and to improve public policy through nonpartisan advocacy. In keeping with our reputation for nonpartisanship and fairness, the League does not align itself with any political party nor support or oppose any candidate for public office. The League is committed to providing factual information about issues and about the candidates' positions on those issues in order to help voters make their own decisions and participate in the process. Please note that the candidates have provided their bios and other information at the table in the back. A few notes before we begin. Early in-person voting begins this Saturday, October 23rd, and runs through Sunday, October 31st. This is something new for New Jersey. Please visit lwvridgewoodnj.org for locations and hours. There aren't locations in Ridgewood, but there are some in the surrounding area. And click on the Voter Service tab. Or you can just Google the League of Women Voters of Ridgewood and it should pop up, and click on Voter Service. If you'd like to visit us at the League, we meet once a month, and our next general meeting is tomorrow, Thursday, October 21st at 12:30 in this building, Village Hall at 131 North Maple Ave, next to the library. Feel free to drop in as a guest for a meeting. All are welcome, including men, non-citizens, non-residents of Ridgewood, and students age 16 and up. We ask that everybody please refrain from using the League name or any photographs or footage from the debate in campaign materials. Any such use has not been authorized by the League. Please also take a minute to turn off your cell phones. Our question vetters this evening are our League membership chair and past president, Janet Anderson, who is not a Ridgewood resident, and League director and Ridgewood resident, Carolyn Jacoby. Finally, our moderator tonight is Vicki Sidro, who's also not a Ridgewood resident. Ms. Sidro is a member of the Northern Valley League and is a trained moderator. Ms. Sidro will introduce the candidates and explain the format for tonight's debate. She will also adhere to a strict time schedule to ensure fairness. We ask that you provide her and the candidates with courtesy and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome, everyone. It's good to see people in person. Been doing a lot of Zoom virtual candidate nights in the last year and a half. So, first of all, I just want to introduce Patty and Joan, who will be our timekeepers for this evening, letting the candidates know when it's time to slow down and then stop. So when you vote, either by mail-in ballot or early voting or on November 2nd, you'll be voting for one individual to fill a 3-year term because of a vacated seat here in Ridgewood. So we have two candidates this evening, Melanie Hoban and Paul Vagianos. And I'm going to be asking them to start with opening statements. They have 2 minutes each. And Ms. Hoban, will you start, please?
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting. I've been serving our village community for decades. Volunteering as the Travell School Safety Chair, I work to implement initiatives for both student and pedestrian safety, something I feel very strongly about. A recent report by Village Hired Traffic Consultants, NV5, supported my recommendations. Over the past decade, I've been an active participant in the land use issues facing the village. I stood with fellow residents against high-density housing developments. As a result, the final developments are much smaller than the original huge proposals. I learned about the critical impact of that overreach on the village and how elected officials can drive those projects while ignoring meaningful resident input. We can never let that happen again. In 2016, I was appointed to the Village Planning Board and became board liaison to the Historic Preservation Commission. I also serve on the Visioning Committee, the Master Plan Committee, and the Site Plan Exemption Committee. I have attended and participated in countless Village Council meetings, including budget hearings. I'm asking for your vote to protect the village we know and love. We can do better to improve Ridgewood, including the Central Business District, the tree canopy, parks, roadways, and more. As a proud third-generation resident, I'm familiar with all the village neighborhoods and their needs. I will work to keep municipal taxes within the 2% cap, and I'll be a responsible steward of your tax dollars. Make no mistake, this unexpected election is critical to the future of Ridgewood. There's still much at stake. Do not let history be repeated by electing my opponent, who for the past decade has stood on the wrong side of every major village issue. I love this village, and if you care about the future of Ridgewood, please vote Hoban for Village Council. My statements will be posted on votehoban.com.
Thank you. Mr. Vagianos, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. I want to welcome everyone tonight. I want to thank you all for attending and watching at home, but I especially want to thank the League of Women Voters. This is an organization that has two purposes. First, to get more people voting, and second, to make sure that they are as informed as they can be. It's an excellent mission. We all appreciate it. 27 years ago, I left my job as an environmental attorney to come to Ridgewood to open a restaurant. When I found the space that I was looking at, which was the old abandoned Woolworths building, I walked in and it was a wreck. Nobody wanted it for years. It had been abandoned, and the day I got there, the water was pouring in from the ceiling that was dilapidated from the rain that had hit the night before. It was perfect. I told the realtor, I'll take it. A couple weeks later, I brought my wife, Jeannie, who's in the audience tonight, to take a look. She was not as enthusiastic as I was when I showed it to her. But we mortgaged our home, borrowed from every relative we knew, and we moved our family to Ridgewood. We've never looked back. Next month, we'll be celebrating our 25th anniversary at It's Greek to Me restaurant. If you stop by any night, you'll usually see me bussing tables, working the phones, or bagging takeout orders. Jeannie and I built our home here, raised our girls here, sent our girls to Ridgewood Public Schools from Hawes to graduation day at RHS. It's been a great ride. We love the schools, we love the charm, we love Ridgewood. That's why I'm running for Village Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next section, there are 3 questions that were developed by the Ridgewood League. Each question, candidates will have 2 minutes each to respond, and each question will then be followed by a 5-minute crosstalk. So we're going to start. I'm going to read the question, and then Mr. Vagianos, would you please start? During COVID, the public interest in information increased significantly. There was an outpour of public will requesting hybrid access to Village Council meetings. We define hybrid access as allowing both in-person attendance and enabling the public to call in with comments and questions while viewing the live-streamed Village Council meetings. If elected, is this something you would support, and if not, why? Sir, 2 minutes.
Hybrid access should not even be a question in our town. Why wouldn't we want more people participating in village government? We have seniors who have difficulty getting out, who once this is passed, will now be able to participate. We have residents with physical disabilities who would now be able to participate. We have parents who have children who can't get out or can't afford a sitter every night, who would then be able to participate. We have commuters who just don't have the time. The list goes on and on and on. Hybrid access will allow everyone to participate in our village government. Are we saying that in this digital age, we are not going to use that technology to engage more people? This is an issue about transparency and engagement from our community. You either want people engaged in community government or you don't. The council's vote against hybrid access means that they don't want community engagement. I'm going to give you another example. Several years ago, there was a volunteer board called the Financial Advisory Committee. In a town of exceptionally smart people, these 7 or 8 people were some of the smartest people I'd ever met. Their volunteer job was to advise the village council on the ins and outs of our village budget. All they did was review and make recommendations. Why would anyone say no to that? But the current administration disbanded them, stunningly. The village belongs to the residents, not the village council. If I'm elected to the village council, I will move as quickly as possible to reinstate the Financial Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'll answer the question, which was, do I support hybrid meetings? And I do. I support involving as many people in the process of what we're doing up here in our planning board meetings, council meetings, and all meetings to the best of our abilities. I'm not going to speak on any other subjects at the moment. I believe there are some legalities about this issue that we would need to investigate. I certainly don't know that I think it's something that could go on indefinitely, but we have been in the middle of a pandemic. There are still people who, for a variety of reasons, some of which Mr. Vagianos named, can't and aren't comfortable making it to these meetings for those reasons. And for some delineated amount of time, I completely support having hybrid access. I do believe we all need to be aware of the legal implications, how that's implemented, and how it would come into play. But I certainly support any and all resident involvement. I always have, and in any way that we can continue to provide that to people, I support.
Thank you. So there's time for a 5-minute crosstalk. If either of you have anything additional you want to say or ask of each other, now's the time.
Melanie, I'm curious, why would you end this at the end of COVID? This was something that we discovered as a result of COVID that gave people greater access. We didn't realize we could do it before. But now that we know that we can do it, and I can't see any legalities that would prevent us from doing it because we do it now. So why would you not want to continue this if it gives all those groups of people an opportunity to engage with the government?
I look at it from a different perspective. I attended these meetings in whatever capacity I could while raising 5 young children. Babies came with me. I got home late, and I managed in many of the ways that I could. I am looking at other parents within this audience who I have seen here with newborn babies, helped them while holding their babies so that they could attend these meetings in this audience currently. There are a variety of ways to participate, and I believe that at some point, when the pandemic is no longer what is hindering the safety issues of having people in the building, I believe that at some point people will have to begin to show up and ask the questions of our elected officials and appointed officials in person. I would have to investigate further, but to my knowledge, there are some legalities about public comments being given virtually, time limits on how to address those, and I simply would want to investigate them further before putting that into effect in a permanent way. I am fully supportive at the moment, while it is dangerous and in some ways harmful to certain members of our society and our population to come out. I completely support it. I'm not 100% sure myself why it's something that's being argued so strenuously, but I do understand that there are some legalities. I understand some other close by municipalities are not adopting this either. So I'm not against the idea. I think it would have to have an end date.
And forgive me, I have a saying, more democracy is more better. That the more people who are involved, the more people who are engaged, there are no legalities of which I am aware. And if we can get some of our seniors involved, again, you were terrific to be able to bring your kids to the meetings. Everyone can't do that. And they want to engage. They want to be part of this. So why would it, if we were able to do it now, why wouldn't we have learned from this incident in our history and say, hey, we can do this even better. And the people who want to come can still come.
I think we have learned more from the pandemic and its impacts than pretty much anything in my memory of my lifetime. And I've been witness to that as we've worked on our visioning and master plan. I've seen wants and needs change, and residents' wants and needs change, and then be vocal about that. I, again, am not arguing in support of having there be other access to people for meetings. I am not as convinced as you are about there being no legal reasons why. Again, time limits on comments, how to respond to comments, who's actually making comments, how that would work. And I'm simply open to investigating it, not writing it off completely at all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Second question. The town garage site on Franklin Avenue has plagued our community for decades. The current council is exploring the use of eminent domain to acquire the land. What is your vision for this area within our central business district, and how will you accomplish it? Ms. Hoban, 2 minutes, please.
So the eminent domain process isn't being explored, it is actively underway. The process has already begun. The village will, in a legal way, purchase the property at a fair market value and begin to remediate it in order to put a community park, a pocket park, some valuable green space, some valuable open space much needed in our community. I 100% support that park. I know that it is, to some people, an odd location. It is the location we have. Ridgewood is built out. Ridgewood is crowded. We have what we have for areas that we can possibly build out. And I do support a pocket park there, a park in some capacity. I would love to see a playscape. I would love to see some safely enclosed area for families to use. The eminent domain process is underway. That's not up for discussion. It's happening. And therefore, I do support going forward with that option.
Thank you. Mr. Vagianos, 2 minutes.
Let me begin by saying I definitely support acquisition of this property. It's the hole in the donut of a piece of property that the village owns, and we should have acquired it 15 years ago, but weren't able to do that. The one problem with putting a park there is that the Franklin Avenue corridor is one of the most dangerous roads in central Bergen County. This 2015 report from the County of Bergen shows several hotspot locations for accidents. The corner of Franklin and Walnut is one of them. The entire Franklin Avenue corridor is a hotspot for accidents. The larger problem, however, is that we often don't plan well. We've decided to buy the property, and we've already decided to put a park on it without asking anybody what they think. That's been a problem for years. We should acquire it. And since we are right in the middle of our master plan process, we should consult our professional planners so that we can redesign Franklin Avenue so it is not such a hotspot for accidents. The timing couldn't be better. But here's what we need to do. We need to plan first and build the park later, not the other way around. That's what we've been doing historically. We act, and then we plan. We can't act impulsively without asking for other opinions or from other professionals. Let me be clear. I love parks. I love trees. I think that this is what we need to do, is have more parks and more trees. The problem is that we need to make changes to Franklin Avenue first. Perhaps we can put a senior park there, one where seniors can exercise and congregate and build muscle strength, or a park for people with handicaps. Why not do both? Let's make sure it belongs there first.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you. Okay, we have 5 minutes for any crosstalk.
So I guess I'd begin by, I loved your suggestions of at least that a park would be there, because I think you were quoted as saying it would be a terrible place for a park. And I know historically you have probably been involved in the discussions about putting a garage or parking there to some degree. I'm aware that the more impervious coverage we continue to place throughout this village, the less green space, the less tree canopy that we replace, the less green space that we provide, we're not meeting the needs of the residents. I'm glad that you brought up the master plan process, because I'm obviously very involved in that. Last night at our phase 2 unveiling and our meeting, we specifically discussed this property. And there are a variety of options of things that we can put there. And I believe that will begin with a green space. I would never want to designate it just a family pocket park. Just every green space and every park in the village should be available to all generations and groups of people that care to use it. And I completely support that. Franklin Corridor is extremely dangerous. I again, was involved in the studies and in the master plan process where we rated those, graded and rated those corners, what level of service they operate at. And most of that corridor, you're right, does operate in certain times at a level of service F and D. They're dangerous. I don't think we need to have a park where kids are kicking balls out into the middle of Franklin Avenue. I agree. Much of what you say, I don't disagree with. I do believe in planning and then putting into place, and I have said before, I think at times, we plan, or we place, then plan. I don't disagree with you. But what I know is that in our visioning process, residents wanted more green space. Hands down, walking paths, space to use for this purpose, for a free purpose like this. And I'm curious what else you would see there. I know that you had said it's a terrible place for a park. Where else would you put a park? Or what would you see there?
Well, I think I gave a couple of suggestions. The senior park, the park for people with handicaps. This intersection has such a tortured history. I remember in 2008, Girl Scout troop in Ridgewood had a project on the corner of Walnut and Franklin to attempt to make the corner safer.
Yes.
At that time, they asked me to sponsor a couple of bucks. We threw it in. It was great. It didn't last. At some point, one man was killed there. I know personally a gentleman who was hit by a car. He was not seriously injured. It's a bad place for a park. And it sounds like history is repeating itself that, well, we want to check with the master plan, but we want to put a park there. Let's see what our planners have to say about this. Let's talk to them, because I know I've spoken to several members on the council. They've decided. And the other problem with this is they want to use Green Acres funding. Here's the problem with Green Acres funding. It's free money. Sounds great. The problem with Green Acres funding is you can never go back. So once you put the park there, if you find out you made a mistake, or 30 or 40 years down the road, you want to put something else there, it's really hard to get rid of that park. And since it's contiguous to another larger parcel of property, it would be foolish to bind the hands of some council, many of whom may not have even been born yet, for something that we cannot foresee. We need to be flexible, and we need to plan. And I just don't see that happening here. I've been watching this for 25 years. The problem is that too many council people believe that once 2,243 people have voted for them, they need no further advice. They already know all they need to know, and they don't seek out the advice from the people who can guide them.
I just have one comment about that. If I'm not mistaken, we are using open space funds and money put aside in the 2017 budget for the purchase of this property. There are other parks and properties within the village that have been purchased using Green Acres funds and have certainly become their own level of problematic and were at that time. But if I'm not mistaken, the money was set aside in the budget back in 2017 for the purchase of this park. And that, combined with open space funds that are also already set aside, leave us with no green space money, Green Acres grants.
Absolutely right.
Thank you.
I think the issue is
Excuse me.
for construction of
5 minutes
the park
is up.
itself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Next question. Climate change is creating extreme weather conditions. Increasing trees is the single best response that individuals and local municipalities can do to mitigate many of these adverse effects. For decades, the Village Council has reduced the budget for the planting, tree maintenance, and the Shade Tree Municipal Department. The 2022 budget will include a robust budget request for trees. Do you see trees as a priority within the budget? Mr. Vagianos, 2 minutes, please.
Melanie, I think we're on the same page. We need to prioritize trees, no question about it. Our tree-lined streets are one of the crown jewels of our beautiful town. The problem is always that public funds are always in tight supply. And when you need to replace a truck or plant a tree always takes the back seat. It's easy to push trees to next year. No more. If I'm elected, trees will always be a priority, and there will be a line item that is robust in our budget for trees every year. But not because, as the question states, that trees are the single best response to climate change. They're a response. But if we think that once we plant trees, we've done our job, we haven't. We need a more holistic approach. We need to start purchasing electric vehicles for our municipal fleet. You want to make a difference? That's where you do it. Not so easy, but we need to. We have to. We need better zoning for something we just talked about, to reduce the elimination of impervious surfaces. That's why there's so much flooding, so many other problems. And we need to promote backyard composting. We need to get our community, which is so environmentally conscious, to embrace these ideas. I was a Deputy Attorney General for the Environmental Prosecutions Task Force in the 80s. We prosecuted ExxonMobil and many other big companies. I was an environmentalist before it was fashionable, back when we were trying to explain to people what climate change was. We need to get everyone on board this train today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 2 minutes.
As evidenced in my answer to the previous question and what Paul says, I 100% support a robust tree budget. Our tree budget was not cut this year in any capacity. Our tree budget was used for the unanticipated impact of the emerald ash borer. Many of our trees were felled to mitigate that impending damage. I have been steadfastly in favor of a robust tree budget. I support a voter-decided question imposing a small tree tax to residents, not discussing a fine or a permit fine fee attached to it. I support a resident-decided tree tax so that our tree budget is always kept a priority. It's our responsibility to keep Ridgewood sustainable and green and build on that in every way that we can. I've attended all of the events when trees are handed out at Mike Seaton at the recycling center and planted those trees. I've supported it in every capacity. I've worked actively against the overuse of impervious coverage. Obviously, this is just a start, but I back and support anything to protect our tree city.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes for crosstalk.
I'm good.
We don't disagree.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. That worked very nicely. Okay, so the next section is the questions that the public asked. They were sent in via email or tonight here on cards. So we're going to get started with that. The forum ends at 9 o'clock, so we'll take as many questions as we can until we need to go to closing statements. And so we will start. First question. This year, Ridgewood had a 4.3% increase in municipal taxes. What budget reductions would you propose, and how would you expect to get them implemented? Please be specific. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute, and we won't use the 30-second pause card because 1 minute's short. Thank you.
This year, we were met with an unprecedented global pandemic and the fallout from that. The municipal cap has stayed at the 2% or under every year until this year. We had to play catch up. Our building department was not collecting fees. Our parking enforcement was not collecting revenue. Our revenue streams were nipped completely, cut off. And this year we had to play catch up. We are keeping our village afloat. And this year, for the first time in many years, was the first time that our tax cap went above the 2%. There is no answering to what we've all experienced over the last 18 months to 2 years. We've all been through it in one way or another, and this was simply the village's side effect. The tax cap was raised in order to play catch up to the effects of pandemic.
Melanie, you're absolutely right.
1 minute, please.
There was nothing we could have done for the loss of revenue. But going forward, there's something we can do. I've been in business for 25 years. When my costs increase, as they always do, whether it's labor costs, rental costs, utility, or most likely food, I can't just pass that along to the consumer like the village passes it along to the residents. I need to increase revenue. And that's the way I've done business for decades. Where can we get more revenue? We're in the property tax business. We need to get more revenue without hitting our residents. If you note, Paramus has very low property taxes. We have very high property taxes because they have great ratables. They've been saying this for decades. They work with their commercial establishments to enhance them so that they work well. Once you do that, you can increase the taxes on them. Note, I'm a business owner in the Central Business District, and I'm saying increase my taxes. But we must do it by helping them to increase their revenue for the benefit of the residents.
Thank you. Next question. Should COVID vaccinations be a requirement for all village employees? Mr. Vagianos, 1 minute.
Yeah, there's really no way around this. We see where the world is going. If we want to eliminate this virus, we have to take strong measures. Long ago, I required all of my employees to be vaccinated. I went further. I required all people who want to come and dine indoors must show proof of vaccination. When I showed up at my restaurant that first day, there were 5 television news cameras there. I walked over to them and I said, "What are you guys doing here?" And they said, You're the only one in New Jersey doing this. This is what we want. And when I say we, the residents, all of my customers are over the moon, happy about this. In this part of the country, this is what we need to do. In every part of the country, it's what we need to do. But here, this is an electorate that understands. We should absolutely require vaccinations of all village employees.
Thank you. 1 minute, Ms. Hoban.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Should COVID vaccinations be a requirement for all village employees?
There's no denying the effects of the pandemic on our society. There is also no way currently that I can see to mandate vaccines for everybody. There are people that are not able to take certain vaccines. There are people that are not willing to take certain vaccines, and they have their reasons. Do I believe that those people should then mask before entering business? I do. Do I believe in mandating vaccines for people? I do not.
Thank you. Next question. The Village Council website is in need of an overhaul to make it more user-friendly and to provide better access to town-wide issues and information. If elected, will you push for this much-needed reform to take place? Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
The village-wide website.
Yes.
The village-wide website is a topic of so much conversation, yet I never have a problem traversing it. I understand that people believe it requires some overhaul. I believe it's fairly self-explanatory. I'm always open to the discussion of what can make it easier for residents to access it and access the information that's on it. I've certainly never had a problem. I've always thought it was a little slow, and that was maybe the only complaint I had. I'm always open to resident input in how to get information to residents. I feel it is important. I have always maintained transparency. Nobody can say I haven't. I offer information, and I'm willing and able to give it to people. I'm always open to suggestions if that's something that's a desire. However, I don't find the village website to be all that complicated.
Thank you, Mr. Vagianos.
And here's the problem.
1 minute.
I'm 64 years old. I can get through it most days. Some days, I have no idea where I'm going. I admit it. I'm older, and I'm not as tech savvy as people Melanie's age. And as a result, I am not stupid, slow, dim-witted. I'm older. We have to cater and work with people my age and older. I met a woman who said, we were online to get our COVID vaccinations once, and she said, you know, the only way we could get this vaccination was because somebody came and helped us. My husband looks at the computer, and it's the enemy. For those who understand how to make it through, they don't understand how difficult it is for many other people. We need to make this as user-friendly as my iPhone, that everyone knows how to use. We can do that, but we have to accept that it's an issue.
Thank you. Next question. Over the past year, community members in Montclair, Teaneck, and right here in Ridgewood who have disagreed with local council policies have taken to the initiative petition process. In each case, they have been met with lack of support and even resistance from their municipal clerks and council members. What role, if any, do you feel that council members and village staff should play in enabling voter petition processes? Mr. Vagianos.
They
1
should
minute.
absolutely enable. Enable is the right word. This isn't the council's town, it's the residents' town. They are only an instrument of the residents. And if the residents get enough signatures, the village clerk's office should assist in every way possible to help them get a petition put on the ballot. Recently, the One Village, One Vote petition was met with disdain, rejection, to the point where a lower court and a unanimous appellate court said that the village clerk's office committed wrongdoing. We can't let that ever happen again. I've been on both sides of a petition. Several years back, there was one involving the town garage. That went through well. I didn't support it, but I believe that the petition process is our checks and balances on what the council does.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
I can't speak to what's going on in the towns named in the question. I can speak to what I've seen here, and both petitions that Paul just mentioned were successful in their end goal. I participated in the garage petition you're referring to from a few years ago, and that petition was voted on. We got the appropriate amount of signatures. I remember being met with, while people differed in their opinions, we were met with, the petition was met as professionally as I could possibly have expected. I was not involved in anything to do with the second petition that you mentioned. I believe in Ridgewood. The petition process has always been supported. I would support it. It doesn't always have to be a subject you like. You have to be willing to hear the process out.
Thank you. Next question. Health Barn is an important part of the Ridgewood community, yet the current council spent the better part of a year resisting the new lease. Please describe your thoughts on Health Barn and your future commitment to support this successful operation. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
So if I'm not mistaken, I'm the only person up here who can speak on this subject. Mr. Vagianos has a direct pecuniary interest in this business, so I believe, as it would stand, in any issues to do with Health Barn moving forward from here on into any council activities, I would be the only one of the two of us able to actually vote on, speak on, or determine any responsibility about. Health Barn is currently without a lease. I understand that there have been historical issues with this business, and I would look very, very closely into how to find a meaningful balance between the business that is being run in that neighborhood and how that impacts those homeowners and how that impacts the business, how that impacts the village. So in the absence of a signed lease, I'd like to review its terms. I haven't done that recently, and I would like to review the terms of the Health Barn lease, find ways to improve, and how to work with the neighbors in that.
Thank you.
Melanie,
Mr.
you and I
Vagianos,
couldn't
1
be
minute.
further apart on this issue. Health Barn has pumped $3.1 million into our central business district, into 20 restaurants to help them survive the COVID epidemic. I've been here for 25 years. I've never seen anybody do what Health Barn has done. And in so doing, they feed 9,000 food insecure residents of Bergen County every week. While they're not doing that, here's their mission and their goal. They are teaching children and adults how to eat healthy. This is the best public citizen I have seen in the entire time I've lived in Ridgewood. And the thought that the council and you would want to get rid of this public citizen is anathema to me. I can't understand it.
Thank you. Next question. As of November 1st, 2021, the Ridgewood EMT has been defunded by our village council. As a result, per diem EMTs have left in droves and volunteers have significantly decreased. What is your position on this controversial decision affecting Ridgewood residents, of which a significant percentage are elderly or vulnerable? Mr. Vagianos, 1 minute.
The EMTs need to be reviewed. I think that this was a rush to judgment. I understand there was a problem with an EMT during his shift. This is a system that's been in place for decades. And, you know, we talk about our taxes all the time, and we can't figure out why they're always so high. And in place of the current EMTs, we hired several firefighters. Listen, I love the firefighters. We need them. They're great guys. They're essential. Each firefighter, during the course of their career, costs us millions of dollars, where we had EMTs for basically $20 an hour, people who are dedicated, who care, and this is a system that's in place in most of the towns in New Jersey. I don't understand why we had to change that system.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
The EMTs were not defunded. One of the 2 per diem daily EMTs was removed, and the other EMT, the volunteers still work. The other EMT was simply moved from the building where they were currently housed to the fire department. It made the most sense for the amount of calls that were coming in, and it made the amount of sense budgetarily. The EMTs were not defunded.
Thank you. Next question. Despite there being a village social media policy, cyberbullying and social media is still an issue in the village. Would you take any steps, if elected, to curb negative discourse and cyberbullying on village social media, and what would those steps be? Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
This is a very interesting topic. I have worked with children in our community and in many community organizations to stop bullying in any capacity, to prevent people from experiencing what that means. I understand that there is an accusation or a comment out there towards me as far as that goes. We are all human. Nobody walks between the raindrops, as it was put to me. And regrettably, I may have even participated in something where somebody may have felt that way. That said, I, hands down, unequivocally, do not support any sort of cyberbullying. I don't support people putting into writing things that are untrue or harmful or hurtful to anybody else. And I've maintained that. I've lived that.
Thank you.
So here's the
Mr.
problem.
1 minute.
We talk the talk, but we don't walk the walk. We are a stigma-free community, but if you go on any one of several local Facebook pages, you're going to see neighbors, friends, residents attacking one another. This has to end. I talk about unity. I talk about treating people around us like neighbors. And the problem is at the top. The problem is that our elected officials, people appointed to boards, people who are community leaders, not just engage in this, but they spearhead it. They live on the divide. They love to divide our community. There are those guys and there's us. There's that side and there's our side. No more. We have to end this. It starts at the top. It starts with how we speak to one another. We have to speak to one another like our children are in the room, because they are. We need a zero-tolerance policy for cyberbullying.
Thank you. Development doesn't have to be a bad word, especially when we think about modernizing our village. What is your interpretation or vision regarding development, both from a commercial perspective as well as a residential one, when we think about land use and McMansions being built? Mr. Vagianos, 1 minute.
You know, I'm a businessman, and because of that, Melanie has painted me as pro-development. The truth couldn't be further from that. I am not a pro-development guy. I'm not an anti-development guy. I want to see what's presented. We have no choice but to see what's presented. Personally, in our central business district, which I'm as familiar with as any human being, I don't see any need for additional development at all. We just had a flood of development. I think we're good for a long time. However, we need to review what comes in. We can't say no before we see it. Legally, we'll be in trouble. And by the way, maybe somebody proposes something that we all look at and say, that's not such a bad idea. So I'm open-minded, but I have to see something that's going to move me. Because right now, I don't think we need anything else.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
So I don't need to paint anybody as pro-development. I can simply go back to your statements where you supported the 55 units an acre originally proposed by the developers of the buildings which are currently built, or when I believe you were quoted as saying, if you had your way, the garage would be 10 stories high. So that to me, I don't need to do any painting of that image. I worked with developers to mitigate and bring down the density of what ended up here to a reasonable level that fits our village. Beyond that, again, I just want to reiterate, I believe of the people sitting up on this dais at the moment, I'm the only one who would be able to discuss, vote on, or have any reasonable impact on any future development where it would pertain to our central business district. You are a business owner, and that's a wonderful thing. Your business is great and does good things.
Thank you. Continuing in a way, feedback from residents during the master plan visioning process suggests that keeping Ridgewood's historic charm is important. Yet, we know maintaining our historic preservation can come at a price. Central business district buildings can be painted orange, historic homes being demolished or changed completely. Others are saved but can cost the village millions. What will you specifically change to protect our history? Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
That was a very packed question. Yes. So what I'll speak to is what I can. The history in the village is imperative, has always been something I have worked to preserve and protect. I've been open and vocal when beautiful old historic homes have been taken down in place of McMansions, sometimes to a detriment where somebody may not agree with me and be offended by my opinion. I've also worked with business owners as they've come into town and looked to grow and make their businesses thrive. If a business felt that thriving meant painting it orange, that brightens my day. I smile every single time I see that building. I think that it just depends on whose history you're looking at and at what point can we stop people from expressing themselves via a color. If the color detracts from the history in this village, we're not on the right track.
Thank you. 1 minute, please, Mr. Vagianos.
Ridgewood's historic charm is what first drew me to this town. And 25 years later, I believe that that should be maintained forever. Melanie, I'm so disappointed that you continue this false narrative when you say that I advocated for 55 units an acre, when you say that I advocated for a garage 10 stories high. It is completely untrue, but you continue to say it because you can just say whatever you want. And that is the only thing that I find very upsetting, because I would never, ever say anything like that about you.
Thank you. Stay on topic a little bit here. Valley Hospital has moved their current campus to Paramus. What would you like to see done with that land use if Valley wants to change its current use? Mr. Vagianos, 1 minute, please.
Well, I think that's the $64,000 question. What's going to happen to Valley Hospital? And I think the answer is nobody knows. A lot of it's going to be up to Valley. A lot of it's going to be up to our master plan visioning process. Certainly, residential homes would be lovely there. We're going to have less to say about it than most people think because Valley owns the property. I think what we'd really like is for Valley to make it into medical offices and not change anything that's there. I hope that's what happens. I hope so hard. I'm just not sure that's what's going to happen.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
I think that the difference is that we are fairly clear based on our litigation, our past litigation with Valley Hospital, and how we're bound by what has happened in the past with them. We know what's going to happen there. We are able to determine what is happening there, and I am actively involved in that process. If you were at the planning board meeting last night, you would have heard the discussion on rezoning that H zone. We are in the process of doing that right now. We have a vague idea of what's going to happen at Valley Hospital. I stayed in this room and stood by residents as we negotiated not to have a 94-foot hospital built in a neighborhood, and I continue to do that. We are bound by litigation with what we can do there. We are bound by fair share housing. We are bound by these decisions.
Thank you. What is your position on improving services for individuals with mental health conditions in Ridgewood? Ms. Hoban?
Can you repeat that?
Sorry. What is your position on improving services for individuals with mental health conditions?
So again, one thing I've been lucky to be a part of was moving some of the negotiating with the builders, with these high-density with the housing units that went into town, to move special needs housing and bring special needs housing into the village. We will have now designated special needs housing for people that need it here in town. We did that as we negotiated with the current builders as these buildings went up. I don't know what else we could do besides bring in more opportunities like that as they present themselves. We were fortunate enough to meet with a builder who was open to that discussion, and we made that happen. Any member of our community with special needs or otherwise deserves a place, deserves any amenities necessary, whether it be by a new park, a park with special equipment for them. That's an absolute priority for me.
Thank you.
Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. What is your position on improving services for individuals with mental health conditions?
Who amongst us hasn't had someone in the family who has a mental health condition? It's ubiquitous. We all have it. We need to deal with it. It is an illness the same as all others. We need to expand our mental health services. We need to start right here at the health department, where people can use that as a resource to be sent to the right place. We can't deal with it ourselves, but we can help facilitate it. For the last few years, I've been involved in the Bergen County Health Fair, and that's exactly what that is. It takes place on the Fairleigh Dickinson campus, and it is a series of people who can help residents find the care that they need. We need to be doing the same thing here in Ridgewood.
Thank you. Here's one on pickleball. In 2021, the Village Council placed a lock on the Glen School pickleball courts, locking citizens out of a public facility during a global pandemic. Please share your thoughts on the pickleball controversy and what steps will you take to address the issue if elected? Mr. Vagianos?
Another example where we talk the talk, but we don't walk the walk. We want seniors to feel at home and comfortable here, and yet we have different hours for pickleball than we do for tennis. Pickleball is more than physical exercise. It is a place for people to congregate. Just so happens that most of the people who play pickleball are seniors. Not all, but this is their group. This is where they gather. This is where they make friends. Remember, when you're younger, you make friends because you have kids in the school system and you meet other people. Seniors are often left alone, and they don't have that opportunity. Pickleball gives them that opportunity. If I'm elected to council, that lock will never be there again, and pickleball will have the same hours as tennis.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
I'm looking in this room at some people who are not seniors and who play pickleball and love this sport. I have seen this become such a topic of such a concerning topic for so many. I understand the differences and how difficult it can be to live in a neighborhood where some noise or some activity hinders your ability to live comfortably. I also understand what it means to be in a community where you can't find an activity or a place to participate in an activity that means something to you. There has to be a way to meet a middle ground here. I am not as familiar with the topic of pickleball and its many arguments that came and went. I have always been open to listening to both sides, and there has to, as usual, with every issue that comes before the council or any member of one of these boards, there is always a way to come to some agreement where everybody that is a resident has access to what they need.
Thank you. This is about the Hudson Street Garage. The Hudson Street Garage has become the source of many safety concerns due to the lack of a proper guardrail safety device on the top level. This allows trespassers to access the roof, risking their own safety and causing damage on the street level. Would you consider an around-the-clock police presence or guard to minimize the risks? Ms. Hoban, 1 minute, please.
Safety is something that I believe is associated with me. When people hear about safety issues in town, they will often think of me as somebody that speaks up about parking issues and safety issues as they are. That's an area that definitely concerns me. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know if the more economical and intelligent answer is putting up the guardrails. I don't know if it is having a round-the-clock guard. I can't imagine stationing one of our valuable police members up there on a 24-hour basis, or certainly on a weekend and nightly basis, is in any way economical or the right answer. But anything that brings safety to the people eating below, walking by below, or trying to utilize that garage is needed. I don't know what the right answer to that would be, whether it would be a rail or that option, but I would be very open to discussing it.
1 minute, please, Ms.
And here's the problem.
Vagianos.
As Melanie says, we don't know the answer. But I'm going to guess that this is not the first parking garage built in the United States, and that this problem has been seen before and dealt with before. Someone outside of the village of Ridgewood knows the answer. Is a full-time guard a possibility? Sure. Is it guardrails? Maybe. The one thing I do know is that I have been on the perimeter on the sidewalk of the garage when a cup was thrown. Didn't get that close to me, maybe 15 feet, but it scared the bejesus out of me. And it could have been a cup, could have been something a little heavier. Whatever it is, we need to do something about it before someone is seriously injured. And my concern is that until someone is seriously injured, we're not going to look as hard as we should be for that answer.
Thank you. How does the Village Council currently work together with the Board of Education, and do you see any additional opportunities for both entities to work together? Mr. Vagianos, 1 minute.
Listen, there's no question that the Board of Ed and the village have worked together for years. However, can we be working more closely? Absolutely. Should we be sharing every single service right now? Of course. It's a no-brainer. We should be working together on everything. And I know we work very closely right now. We can do even better.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
So yes, I believe one of the first ways we can do that is with village council members and Board of Ed members who are willing to work together. I see that building and building as each election passes. I always think that the Board of Ed and the Village Council go hand in hand on so many issues. We've recently seen that with the flooding of the fields and how to handle that. I would like to just take a moment in this question to pivot back to the question about the garage, and I missed my opportunity to say something. Again, an issue where, as a property owner of the property directly next door, this wouldn't be something that Mr. Vagianos, though he would very much maybe want the safety in place, he wouldn't be able to vote on, discuss, or implement any of those changes.
Thank you. In your opinion, what is the most pressing issue facing our village right now? Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
I believe the most pressing issue facing us all right now is the years-long divide. There was the years-long divide that came about when residents finally realized what had been going on while we had been entrusting our elected officials and our appointed officials to do the right thing. People became divided 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago over the pressing issues of high-density housing in Valley Hospital. That divided the town. I saw such anger. I participated in feeling that angst in this room many times, right where you're all sitting. Then there was a national election which divided us and spent years doing so. I feel everybody's inability to realize that simply because we don't agree on an issue means we don't like each other or can't like each other. This shouldn't be about whether or not I like a person because their opinion is different than mine. So to me, I view everybody as a friend and a potential person that I can learn something from.
Thank you. Mr. Vagianos, 1 minute.
Melanie, you and I couldn't agree more. The dialogue that comes from the top is so divisive, and we need to change that. Here's the problem, is that only a few minutes ago, you were saying things about me, about those very issues, about the parking garage, about the high-density housing, that aren't true. And so what are you doing? You're talking in the past, keeping that divide alive instead of looking to the future. Those multifamily houses are built. They're done. Can't change them, whether you liked them or didn't like them. The garage is done. And yet you want to keep that divide going. And that's the problem. You talk the talk, but you don't walk the walk. We have to get past this. We have to stop talking about what happened 5 and 10 years ago. We have to look to the future as a community, and we have to stop saying things about what happened and go forward and be neighbors.
Thank you. Next question. Please define your position on nepotism as it applies to the village. Would you recuse yourself from discussion and voting if you were affected? And do you think an ordinance is needed? Mr. Vagianos?
Let me begin by saying this happened recently, and I want to start with what is done is done. We look forward to the future, and we move on. You know, as an attorney, the standard of care is not whether you did something wrong. It's whether or not there is the appearance of impropriety, whether it looks bad. Because if it looks bad, then it's bad. And that has to be our standard in village government, the appearance of impropriety. We need this enacted so that we don't have these problems going forward. And I'm not saying anything was done incorrectly. And like I said, whatever is done is done. We move forward. But going forward, we can't let that's one of those things that divides us again. We need to keep squeaky clean. We need to make sure that no one can even ask the question, because once you ask the question, that means we could have done better.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
Ethics laws are in place for a reason. We don't need an ordinance to address any ethical issue where it pertains to nepotism. Nepotism has its own definition and is what it is. There are laws and ethics laws in place to prevent that from happening. The fact that the conversation still comes up is remarkable to me. I'm not going to comment on it further, but I will comment on something. I agree with what Mr. Vagianos just said about sometimes just, I may misphrase what you said, but
Appearance of impropriety.
the appearance of impropriety, sometimes just saying something is enough to plant the seed that something is true or wrong. And you're right, people do need to operate on their own, think on their own, and determine whether or not just saying something is enough to really make it true. And where it pertains to this, I simply have nothing left to say. The fact that the conversation and the word nepotism is still being discussed in this room, I can't comment on it. We have ethics laws for a reason.
Thank you. We now know how damaging artificial turf is to the environment. Climate change scientists recommend banning plastic and planting green. The recent flood caused damage to both our municipal fields. Vets, which is grass, cost far less to repair, approximately 5 times less than to repair Maple Field, which is turf. Would you consider going back to grass fields? Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
As a planning board member, I'm fairly well-versed and aware of the flood mitigation plans, the stormwater issues, and what is required by law for us to do here in town to navigate these issues. It has been unprecedented flooding. It seems that is the way we are going. We do need to address this as weather patterns continue to change and point in the direction of this is an ongoing issue. It's not going away. We are involved in and working with all of the other local agencies, the DEP, in order to mitigate these flooding issues. Was the end of the question, would I go back to grass fields?
Yes.
I don't know what level of possibility there is for that, and I'd have to investigate it further before I could answer any further on that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vagianos?
Yeah, this isn't a close one. I remember a few years back after Sandy, Governor Christie said, you know, I think things are changing. This is the third 100-year flood we've had in the last 5 years. We are in a flood zone. The Saddle River overflows every time we have a heavy rain, a very heavy rain. And every time we have to fix the turf fields. We need to adapt. We need to change that. We have to go back to grass. Is it going to be expensive? Yes. Is it going to be more cost effective in the long run than fixing these fields every 3 or 4 years? Absolutely. It's a no-brainer. I mean, the arithmetic is pretty clear.
Thank you. Regarding the significant parking revenue deficits and changes in commuting practices which may impact parking revenues for the foreseeable future, what are your thoughts on how the village might address budget considerations while maintaining services and keeping tax revenues at an acceptable level? Mr. Vagianos?
Forgive me, could you repeat that question?
Sure. I think they're talking about because parking revenues are down and may be for the foreseeable future, how do you address budget considerations while maintaining services and keeping it at increases at an acceptable level?
Got it.
So, okay.
Okay.
Thank you. 1 minute.
Look, the village did a good thing in building a parking deck. Unfortunately, after 80 years, the timing, which was nobody's fault, was the worst thing in history. Can we still fill this parking deck? We absolutely can. People come to my restaurant every day not knowing where the parking deck is, not knowing that it's there. We need to let the world know that it's there. Here's one of our problems. We don't tell anybody anything. We had a great spot picked out to put that parking deck. It is hidden away in a wonderful little nook so it doesn't overwhelm the rest of the village. Nobody knows it's there. And if you don't know how to get there, even if you know it's there, you can't find it. There's too many one-way streets. I hear it every day. We need to get the word out to begin with. Then we need to work with the Central Business District to, as I said before, help them so that we can raise their taxes.
Thank you, Ms. Hoban. 1 minute.
So a couple of things. I don't think that anyone that lives within a block or two or anywhere near that would think it's hidden away in any capacity. I manage to see it every day, and I don't live anywhere near it. But parking revenue is down. We completely agree. There's no debate. The timing, pandemic, people weren't working, people weren't dining, and people weren't shopping, people weren't going out. The parking deck, the revenue fall is what it is, unprecedented, unpredicted. We do need to work with the CBD in order to perhaps incentivize use of that parking garage. And again, I am the only person sitting up on this dais who would be able to do that. I have no interest in the Central Business District, and Mr. Vagianos owns the building directly next door, along with many, many other buildings in town, or has an interest in them, and that would preclude him from any discussion about parking revenue, parking garage at all.
Thank you. Next question. Can you name a time when you supported an issue that was overwhelmingly popular with the residents, even though you might not have agreed 100%? Mr. Vagianos?
No, I think Ms. Hoban goes next.
An issue that the residents
Did
voted
you
for
finish?
that.
Whatever. Could you repeat the question?
Can you name a time when you supported an issue that was overwhelmingly popular with the residents, even though you might not have agreed 100%?
Well, I'm not sure I can think of it offhand. I can tell you about an issue that I supported completely that doesn't have the complete support of the Village Council, which is the every week opening of the pedestrian plaza. This is an excellent example of what I've been speaking about, something that really enhances the Central Business District. It works wonderfully for virtually everyone. There will never be unanimity on any issue, by the way. The residents, I take that back. The residents, from what I have seen, unanimously support the pedestrian plaza every single weekend. And it's something that I've worked very hard to support. By the way, to circle back, Melanie, I wish I owned many, many buildings as you suggest. And in terms of the conflicts that you mentioned, I have met with Village Attorney Matt Rogers, who has outlined what conflicts I have and what conflicts I do not have. It is not quite as broad as you believe, but believe me, I will always follow whatever guidance the village attorney says. It will always be his decision with whatever conflicts I may or may not have.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
So I do struggle to find an area where I didn't land on what would have appeared to be the popular opinion or the majority opinion, although I will always listen to any side and both sides. I don't have to agree with Mr. Vagianos or anyone here on an issue. I'll listen to them. Although, no, I can't say that I have found myself on the wrong side or the opposing side of too many issues. But I think where we're discussing conflicts, I'm not sure how we came back to that, but where it pertains to conflicts of interest, it will be difficult. I certainly would expect that we will disclose absolutely every property with any interest at all in order to determine exactly what can be voted on, what can be discussed, and where legally we would land on that. No, I don't find myself often on an terribly opposing side of most of these issues, even if I don't agree with my neighbors. If they win on a referendum question, or if somebody wins in an election process, that is something that I respect.
Thank you. And this is going to be the last question since we're finishing at 9. What positive impact on the community have you had that you are most proud of? Ms. Hoban, 1 minute.
Beyond my family and my personal relationships that I've spent the better part of 30-something years forming and building in this town, and I treasure, I take more seriously than anything else, not this, not anything else. Though my family and my personal relationships are what I get out of bed for in the morning. Beyond that, the other thing I would say I take the most pride in is my involvement with the master plan committee, my involvement on the planning board, and specifically the master plan visioning and now the master plan rewriting. It's something I unequivocally wish to see to fruition. I take immense pride in that and how we as a committee and a planning board have driven that process. It will be the thing that I hold the most pride in beyond my family from this point.
Thank you. Mr. Vagianos, 1 minute.
Is this an appropriate time to show video of my granddaughter? Because if it is, I just got a new one today.
Oh, congratulations.
All right, sorry, I won't do it. I have a couple of things in my life. I've been here doing this for a while, and for the longest time, it was bringing the village Christmas tree to town, which we just picked out a new one for December. I've been doing that since 2008, and up until recently, that was number one for me, because I really enjoyed the night, and I know how much everybody else enjoyed it. No longer. Feed the Front Lines is the greatest thing I've ever been involved in. And I know I've used this number before, and it may sound overwhelming to you. Here's the really weird thing. It's overwhelming to me that we serve over 9,000 people every week. It is the greatest thing that I and a small group of people have ever been involved in, and we are so proud of that accomplishment.
Thank you very much. So, wow, we covered a lot of territory tonight, and I'm just going to remind you in the 40 minutes about taxes, the COVID vaccine, your website, the petition process, health bond, EMT, social media, development, Valley Hospital, mental health, pickleball, Hudson Street Garage, the Board of Ed, nepotism and grass deals, and the parking revenue. So I just want to thank everybody who submitted questions. We may have not gotten to all of them, but I think we covered a lot of territory, and I hope you found this very informative. So now we're going to closing statements. Each candidate gets 1.5 minutes to wrap up. Mr. Vagianos, you have 1.5 minutes for closing.
Thank you so much, and thank you again, League of Women Voters. You guys are terrific. This election really is about unity. Again, I've mentioned that we are a stigma-free community. Sometimes we don't live up to the name. We need to learn to disagree passionately but respectfully. We need to disagree on issues, not personalities. We are, at the end of the day, neighbors who share the same streets, the same sidewalks, the same schools. That tone is set at the top, like it or not. It always is. I have one great skill in my life. I'm a good listener. I don't know everything. You've heard me say several times tonight, we need to ask people who know. I will always be asking, and the people who I will ask first are the residents of Ridgewood. It's not the village council's town. It's the residents' town. We need to know what you think. A prior mayor used to have mayor's hours where you could make an appointment and meet with him for 15 minutes once a month. It was such a great thing. You met with him privately. If I'm elected, we'll do that again. We'll do that as council people because we need to know. I need your help. Call or text me anytime. My cell number is 201-755-6465. If you think I'm kidding about using it, look on my business card. I hand it out to everybody.
Thank you.
That's how I learn.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you. Ms. Hoban, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you again to the League for hosting tonight, and to all who are here in person, took the time, and who are watching at home. Mr. Vagianos has held himself out as a candidate that will unify our village, and I see some level of disagreement as healthy. Different views and different perspectives will result in better and more informed decisions for our village. In 2016, I can't see how this is an attempt to unify, Mr. Vagianos demanded council candidates sign a pledge supporting the enormous Hudson Street garage in order to participate in a community meeting. He personally benefited from that project, and those with opposing views were not welcome. I feel my opponent lacks transparency on some issues. A recent negative story about me appeared in an online news source without disclosure that the editor of that news source is working on my opponent's campaign. One of my opponent's mail pieces mentions that he's a business owner. He tonight mentioned he's a business owner. It fails to disclose he's a major landlord owning or with an interest in several Central Business District properties. It's not transparent. The campaign is largely funded by major CBD landlords and out-of-towners, in a stark contrast to my grassroots effort funded solely from Ridgewood residents. It is apparent he has so many conflicts of interest, too many to participate in vitally important tasks within the village.
Thank you. Thank you. And now a word from our Ridgewood leader.
I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and for everybody watching remotely. Thank you very much to Ms. Sidro for doing a great job, and to Joan Burns, Linda McNamara, Patty Infantino, and our voter service team. Thank you to our question vetters for choosing such a wide variety of topics. Thank you to Mayor Knudsen and village staff and all who worked to make the evening a success. And thank you very much to our candidates, Ms. Hoban and Mr. Vagianos. Their information is in the back, as are mail-in ballots, which are due on October 26th. Don't forget to vote. Have a good rest of the evening.
Let's have a
Thank
round
you
of
again.
applause for the League of Women Voters. You did a really great job. You said you were nervous. You did great. You did.